yung JMango platform. Are there any questions you would like to ask the developers? Yes, sir.
What's the catch?
What's the catch? Ano daw catch? Obviously, with great power comes great responsibility. With that kind of ability, there are concessions that you have to make. Namely, obviously, the types of applications that you can currently do on JMango. You cannot do games, for example. You cannot do highly graphically intensive games on the JMango platform. Yan talaga, you have to go individually to each device. But if the type of application you're building is simple menus that will interact with a web service, stuff like you want to do a typical Facebook social networking integration type of application, an enterprise database management application, an interactive survey type application, or an application that's content driven, meaning you're trying to provide information to your potential users in a relatively easy manner that they can carry around on their phone. Yeah, that's where JMango really fits the bill. And in a lot of cases, most companies who are looking for sponsored mobile application development, ganon yung nature of the applications that they want. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just curious, sa JMango, sa current version, does it support yung storage, for example, database?
Okay. Does it support local storage? Can you store data on the device? I'll give the short answer. Sa ngayon, given JMango version 2.2, you cannot store a significant amount of storage on the device. Meaning, you cannot do a native database, much like you would use SQLite in Android, or what's the name of the data structure in iOS? Anyway, you cannot locally do local queries, for example, or store a substantial amount of data locally. But what you can do is interact with the cloud, meaning you store your data on a central database server, and then that's where you extract the data as required or as queried by the user. But given that, there is a programming workaround that you can do. If you notice on the scripts that they were demonstrating, I don't think we showed. Anyway, you have concepts of, you can define variables inside the JMango script. Yeah, those variables are actually persistent until you send them somewhere. So meaning if you define a form and then the user enters data onto the form, until you tell JMango to send and forget, quote unquote, those variables, they were still persistent on the device. So you can actually create your own miniature data store using that variable system. But you'd have to code in the ability to parse through whatever data distribution you would want to choose. So some sort of comma separated value mechanism, or some sequence of values that you can get from that one variable. That's how you work around the limitations of not having a substantial local data store. Tama? Any other questions? Check it out, go ahead.
Meron ba kayong mga sample applications sa net tungkol sa JMango?
Yes. All you have to do is go to the JMango wiki. They have 6 or 7 really good tutorials. For me, when I was first looking at JMango as a technology, it took me a week more or less to be comfortable to code on JMango. Even less. Because they have a fair amount of documentation and sample applications that you can look at. the scripting language will initially take time to learn, especially if you're used to object-oriented languages and variable definitions using languages that have been derived from C. But once you more or less get a hang of it, the brevity that you gain from coding in a language that's similar to BASIC really accelerates development. Yes, ma'am?
How flexible is the generated user interface?
Okay, that's a good question. Gusto mo na? Sige, pagod na rin si as of version, how should I put it? When you say flexibility, the default implementation of JMango is fairly linear in terms of the input that you give. There's a newer version of JMango which is currently under beta that allows you to do multi forms on one page. So if you want to adjust the layout, for example, in the example they showed you, Michelle showed you, the input style was one page, one input form, which is kinda quirky. But that's because you're using it on a device that's fairly high-end. The nice thing also about JMango, and for most of you who are interested in mobile development, you're really targeting the smartphone platforms, meaning iPhone and Android. The nice thing about JMango is that it works on S40 devices as well. When you start considering the limited screen space of those devices, that interface makes the most sense. Instead of trying to cram everything together which is why that's also the default. But in version 2.2, you can actually choose to have this kind of layout, meaning multiple form elements on the same interface and adjust accordingly. So you get a bit of the best of both worlds. It's important for you guys to consider developing for the lower end platforms, meaning S40, because they're the ones with a larger market share. So it's very, I know developing for Android or for iPhone is cool because of the things that you can do, but in terms of your potential market reach, if your application is really relevant, the more people will use it if you target the S40s and the S60s. It's just a simple matter of economics. The phones are more affordable. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Sir, are all messages sent to the subscribers are they all stored on the JMango gateway?
That's.
What
Let me see.
interface
Yes.
Let's say the subscriber sends an SMS through the application. Does the message store on the gateway?
No. Short answer, no. If your application, can we show the code that actually sends an SMS in one line?
Which one?
The one, your demo for the gold one. So this is what when Michelle showed you the application earlier for doing the SMS, this is the block that actually displays the menu. Whenever you select an item, it jumps to this particular function or branch. So if you click on this text, this is the only to entry is the code block that it will jump to, and send SMS. To send an SMS, this is just the code that you need. One line. It doesn't have to go through when you send that SMS, it sends it as a regular SMS. You don't have to, doesn't have to go to the JMango server anymore. It's just a straight through peer-to-peer SMS. So if you change that to a variable wherein the number is taken from somewhere else, it'll just send it as a straight to peer-to-peer SMS. the same is true for data that you're uploading through the application. You send it through your own web service. So remember earlier when you were defining an application and you defined whether you will send your data through HTTP, SMS, or whatever. That really has to do with form processing. Once you start reading through the documentation, there's a command sequence there essentially to send all of the data that's on the device, essentially the variables you have that you gather through your forms, and send them somewhere. So that send can be either a peer-to-peer based SMS or through your own listening web service, which will listen for a post request, and then you just parse through the variables accordingly. So you can do actually something like you gather data, then on the device, such as the user's school, the user's personalization options. Your listening web service parses through those variables, and it can create a script dynamically, which you use the JMango web service now to deploy to the device. So lots of options pagdating doon yun.